All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something you specifically asked about.
Oh, okay.
Steven Bartlett's podcast, The Diary of a CEO.
Interesting.
You've probably heard of him, right? From Dragon's Den, or you've seen him around online.
Yeah, I've seen him around.
He's got a huge following, for sure.
He does.
And his podcast, it started out focused on, business, entrepreneurship, that sort of thing.
Right.
But lately, it's really taken a turn towards this whole health and wellness space.
Interesting.
And that's what we're going to look at today.
Okay.
Actually, it's caught the attention of a whole team of investigative journalists.
Oh.
They did like a full deep dive into 18 months worth of Bartlett's content.
Wow.
Focusing on episodes with health advice. And a lot of these guests, they have views that don't exactly line up with what you'd hear from, mainstream medicine.
So they're a bit out there then.
Yeah, a bit outside the conventional thinking.
Okay.
And get this. They brought in medical experts to analyze the claims being made on the show.
Oh, wow. To fact check.
Yeah, to really see what's what.
So we're using their report as our main source today.
Exactly. That's our deep dive today.
Fascinating. So what did they find? What was the big takeaway?
Well, one of the most striking things was the sheer number of potentially harmful claims they found.
Oh, harmful like how?
So we're talking things that could actually make someone's health worse if they followed that advice.
Gotcha.
And they found an average of 14 of these claims.
14?
Per episode.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. Can you give me an example? What sort of claim are we talking about here?
Sure. Remember Dr. Asim Malhotra?
Maybe vaguely.
He was on one of the episodes.
All right.
And he claimed that the COVID-19 vaccine has had this, catastrophic net negative effect on society.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I think that clip went viral or something.
It did. It totally blew up online.
Did Bartlett push back on that at all? That's a pretty strong statement.
Not really. He acknowledged it was a strong statement, but then he kind of just pivoted to talking about his own experience with COVID.
Oh, so he didn't really challenge it?
No, not really. And that's something the report highlights, this tendency to platform these sorts of claims without any real pushback.
Okay. So that's one example. What other stuff did they flag as potentially harmful?
Oh, there are a bunch.
Okay.
Another episode had Jessie Inchaspe on, the glucose goddess.
Oh, yeah, I've seen her on Instagram.
Right. So she shared these anecdotes about women who seemingly reversed their PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, by following her methods.
Interesting.
She even suggested there might be a link between her program and 3 women getting pregnant.
3 women?
Yeah, within a month.
PCOS is a pretty complex condition, right? Hormonally.
Yeah, it affects a lot of women.
So I can see why people would be drawn to that.
Right, like a simple solution.
Yeah.
But the medical experts who reviewed this episode for the report, they pointed out that sample size, 3 women, is tiny.
Yeah, not exactly a scientific study.
Not at all.
And I imagine they were concerned that could lead people down the wrong path.
Yeah, they were worried it'd give listeners this false sense of hope, or even lead them to make decisions that could actually be bad for their health.
Okay, so it's the appeal of a quick fix outweighs the need for real evidence.
Yeah. It's a tricky situation.
It is. Did they have any other examples?
They did. Dr. Mark Hyman was on another episode.
Oh, the functional medicine guy.
Yeah, that's him. He claimed that gluten can cause all sorts of things.
Like what?
Osteoporosis, even autism.
Wait, gluten causing autism? I've never heard that.
Yeah, and the medical experts were like, nope, no scientific basis for that claim.
Wow.
Autism is a complex neurological condition.
Right.
And saying it's caused by gluten is just misleading.
And probably pretty upsetting for parents, looking for answers.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got these guests making these kind of wild claims, and Bartlett's not really pushing back. It's a pattern. Does the report say anything about why this might be happening?
They do touch on this bigger picture, like the declining trust in traditional institutions.
Like doctors and scientists and stuff.
Yeah, and the rise of all these alternative sources of information.
Especially online, right? Like podcasts and social media.
Exactly. It seems like there's this growing audience for these narratives that challenge the mainstream, even if they aren't based on solid evidence.
I guess people are just looking for answers. And sometimes a simple answer, even if it's wrong, is more appealing than dealing with all the complexity.
That's it, exactly. And that's where it gets really tricky.
How so?
Because wanting to have open conversations and explore different ideas, that's one thing.
Right.
But then there's this risk of exposing a huge audience to misinformation that could actually hurt them.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin.
The report really highlights that tension between wanting open dialogue and potentially causing harm.
Right, right.
Okay, so another episode that stood out was one with Dr. Thomas Seyfried.
Okay.
He basically presented the ketogenic diet as like the solution for treating cancer.
The keto diet, like for cancer.
Yeah, and he went so far as to dismiss conventional cancer treatments like chemo and radiotherapy.
Whoa, hold on. Ditching chemo for a diet? That sounds super risky.
Yeah, the medical experts were really concerned about that.
Yeah, because chemo, while it's rough, it does save lives, right?
Yeah, it's a proven treatment.
So to just say throw that out and do a diet instead?
It could have really bad consequences.
For sure.
So here we have all these guests making these claims,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem like Bartlett's really offering a counterpoint,
Yep.
challenging their statements.
What does that leave the listener with? I mean, where do they go from there?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's something the report digs into next. They look at the impact these episodes might be having on listeners. You know, how people are responding, what the experts are saying about the potential consequences.
So we're starting to see the potential harm here.
Yeah.
But what about Bartlett's responsibility? I mean, he's got this massive platform.
Yeah. And what did he have to say about all this?
That's a good question.
Those are some of the bigger questions this report tackles, this whole issue of responsibility and regulation in the podcasting world, especially because there's not really any oversight like you have with traditional media outlets.
Right, right.
And they do address Bartlett's response.
Oh, they do?
And reactions from some of the guests themselves.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm really curious to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, and what this all means for us as listeners, you know?
Yeah, like how do we navigate this whole thing?
This increasingly complex world of health information.
Right, because it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
So we'll unpack all of that and more in the next part of our deep dive.
It's going to be a good one. It's wild to think how these sorts of claims can gain traction, especially when someone with Bartlett's reach gives them a platform.
Yeah, it's not even direct endorsement, right?
Ah.
It's more like this implied thing. Like
Yeah.
if you admire someone and you trust them,
You're more likely to listen.
yeah, you're going to be more open to what they're saying, even if it sounds a bit off.
And honestly, these alternative health narratives, they're often presented in a way that's just more captivating
Oh, for sure.
than, you know, the sometimes complicated explanations you get from mainstream medicine.
It's way easier to latch on to a simple solution, even if it's not totally accurate.
Right, than to really grapple with the nuances of science.
Yeah, it's that classic easy answer versus complex reality thing.
Exactly, and especially when it comes to health issues.
Oh, absolutely.
You're already feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
You want that quick fix.
That glimmer of hope,
Yeah.
rather than confronting the uncertainty of evidence-based medicine.
Like with the glucose goddess and the PCOS thing. It makes sense why someone struggling with that would be drawn to those stories
Of course.
of seemingly miraculous recoveries,
Yeah.
even if the evidence is flimsy.
It's that human need for control,
Yeah.
for a clear path to feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
And these alternative narratives, they just play into that sometimes more effectively than conventional medicine does.
So where do we go from here? We can't just like shut down conversation or censor people.
Right.
But how do we protect ourselves and others from this misinformation?
Especially when it comes to our health. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, but I think a good starting point is to be more critical.
So not just accepting everything we hear.
Exactly. We need to actively engage with the information we're consuming.
Asking questions.
Yeah, ask yourself, who's saying this? What are their qualifications? What might their motivations be? And crucially, what evidence is there? Like, are there any reputable studies to back up what they're saying?
Okay, so someone's charisma or
Yeah.
their ability to tell a good story doesn't automatically make them trustworthy.
Right. Especially when it comes to our health.
Especially with health. Yeah.
And another thing, be wary of anecdotes.
Mm-hmm.
Just because something works for one person doesn't mean it'll work for everyone.
It's not a guarantee.
Look for scientific studies, preferably ones that have been peer-reviewed and replicated.
That makes sense. Another thing that strikes me is this idea of a one-size-fits-all solution,
Oh, yeah.
which we saw with some of these guests on Bartlett's show.
Right.
Our bodies are complex, and what we need for our health is incredibly individual.
You're absolutely right. That's why getting personalized advice from a qualified medical professional is so important.
They can look at your specific situation,
Exactly.
your medical history, all of that.
And help you navigate the complexities of it all.
It feels like all this speaks to a broader point about media literacy,
Absolutely.
which is becoming more and more crucial with the amount of information we're bombarded with. Being able to tell a factual report from an opinion piece, understanding how algorithms shape what we see online, being aware of potential biases, it's like these are all essential skills now.
You're so right. We need to be able to navigate the digital world and evaluate information effectively, and that's especially true when it comes to our health.
The report mentioned that Bartlett's production company, Flight Studio, put out a statement in response to the investigation.
Oh, they did? What did they say?
They mainly focused on defending the podcast's format
Okay.
and how they choose their guests. They stress that they're all about open-minded conversations
Okay.
and that they vet every guest before they come on the show.
Thoroughly.
Yeah, they said so.
But did they address the concerns about spreading potentially harmful information?
Not really, no. Their focus was more on freedom of expression for their guests
That's it.
and showcasing diverse viewpoints,
Yeah,
even if those viewpoints don't necessarily line up with Bartlett's own personal views.
So they're positioning themselves as a platform for open dialogue, even if that dialogue includes some iffy information.
Yeah, and that's a tough line to walk, right?
It is.
Balancing freedom of expression with protecting listeners.
Reminds me of those conversations about social media and content moderation.
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
It's a complicated issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something we need to keep talking about, especially as podcasts and online platforms become more influential.
Did any of the guests themselves respond to the report?
Some did, yeah.
Oh, really?
Some defended their claims.
Okay.
Others chose not to comment.
What about Asim Malhotra, the vaccine guy?
Yeah, he doubled down on his stance.
Oh, wow.
So his views are backed by scientific evidence.
And what about the glucose goddess?
Jessie and Chaspe. Yeah, she clarified her position.
Okay.
Said she sees reversing PCOS symptoms as more of a remission,
Okay.
not a complete cure.
Right.
And she mentioned that she did a big survey-based pilot study
Okay.
with almost 3,000 participants to test her methods.
So at least she's trying to back up her claims with some data.
Yeah, although she admitted it wasn't a peer-reviewed scientific study.
Okay, so not the gold standard.
Not quite, no.
But it shows you the range of evidence that gets thrown around in these discussions.
Right. It can be really hard to tell what's legit.
And what's not.
Exactly. And that's why being a critical consumer of information is so important.
It's not about dismissing everything that's not from a peer-reviewed journal.
Right.
But about approaching everything with a discerning eye, asking questions, looking for evidence, considering the source.
Yeah, their credentials, their motivations.
And it all comes back to critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Recognizing our own biases.
Oh, totally. We all have them.
Yeah.
And they can affect how we process information without us even realizing it.
Like confirmation bias,
That's a big one.
where we're drawn to information that supports what we already believe.
Even if it's not totally accurate.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of those tendencies and actively seek out different perspectives.
Even if they challenge what we think we know.
Yeah, being open to new information and different viewpoints is so important for making informed decisions about our health.
So we've come full circle back to that initial question of balancing open dialogue with protecting ourselves from harmful misinformation.
We have. It's a delicate balance, and it requires us to be engaged, informed, and discerning.
Informed consumers of information.
Precisely.
This has been so eye-opening.
It has.
The world of health information is so complex.
It really is.
And it's clear that we need the right tools to navigate it effectively.
Couldn't agree more. It's a constant process of learning and adapting, especially as the digital world keeps changing.
Speaking of adapting, the report also talks about some bigger implications of this whole trend.
Oh, right, for the future of health information.
What are some of the key takeaways there?
That's exactly what we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive. We'll look at strategies for navigating this whole landscape and discuss how we can all become more informed and empowered when it comes to health information.
Can't wait to dive into that.
It's going to be good.
It's kind of like we were saying before, right? With Steven Bartlett's podcast.
Yeah.
It's become this example of a bigger trend. It's interesting for sure, but it also makes you think, about the future of health information.
Yeah, especially with trust in traditional institutions kind of eroding.
Yeah, and people are turning to these alternative voices online.
It's like the Wild West out there when it comes to health advice.
Oh, totally.
You've got everyone chiming in, social media influencers, podcast hosts, all talking about complex medical stuff, and it's
tough to sift through.
it's so hard for the average person to figure out what's real and what could actually hurt them.
And it feels like it's especially risky for people who are dealing with, actual health problems.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
They might be desperate for answers.
Yeah. Right, which makes them more susceptible to these quick fixes.
The miracle cures.
Yeah, even if there's no real evidence to back it up.
We're wired to want solutions, right?
We are.
We crave that sense of control, especially when it comes to our health.
Yeah, it's human nature.
And these alternative narratives, they offer that.
A sense of control.
Yeah, they give these simple, compelling explanations.
And it can be very reassuring.
Even if they're not scientifically sound.
Even
It's like that example with Dr. Seyfried.
Oh, the keto for cancer.
Yeah. Someone facing a cancer diagnosis, they might cling to that hope.
Right.
That they can control it with their diet.
But like you were saying, those complex medical issues
Rarely have simple solutions.
Really?
And ignoring proven treatments can be really dangerous.
So I think what we're getting at here is we got to approach health information, especially online, with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Don't just take everything at face value.
Yeah, question it.
So how do we protect ourselves then?
It can feel overwhelming, right?
Totally. There's just so much information.
Coming from every direction.
Yeah.
Honestly, critical thinking is your best tool.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
It means moving from passively taking in information to actively engaging with it.
Engaging, okay.
So ask yourself, who's telling you this?
Okay.
What are their credentials?
Right.
What are their biases? And what evidence is there to support what they're saying?
So don't just blindly trust someone.
Yeah, even if they've got a huge following or they seem really charismatic.
Yeah, look for the evidence.
Exactly.
Solid evidence.
And be super careful with anecdotal evidence.
Like personal stories.
Yeah, just because it worked for one person doesn't mean it'll work for everyone.
Right.
Got to look for those scientific studies.
The ones that have been peer-reviewed.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah. And we can't forget that everyone's different.
That's key.
Our bodies are so complex.
And what works for one person might not work for another at all.
Which is why getting personalized advice
Yeah.
from a qualified medical professional
Is crucial.
It's so important.
They can take into account your individual needs.
Your medical history.
Yeah, everything that makes you unique.
It really comes down to finding that balance between staying informed but also being discerning about what we choose to believe.
Especially when it comes to our health.
Especially with our health, yeah.
You said it perfectly.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening.
It has, hasn't it?
It really has.
I feel like I have a whole new perspective.
It's like media literacy 101.
It is.
But for health.
Absolutely. And it's becoming such an essential skill.
In this digital age.
Yeah, knowing how to separate fact from opinion.
Understanding algorithm.
Recognizing biases.
It all matters.
It all plays a role in making those informed decisions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest one is don't be afraid to question what you hear.
Especially when it comes to your health.
Especially your health. Be curious, be skeptical, and be proactive about finding good information.
From credible sources.
Don't just blindly follow trends or fall for those easy answers.
Critical thinking isn't about being cynical or shutting out new ideas.
Not at all.
It's about approaching information with a curious but discerning mind.
Yeah.
It's about empowering yourself.
To make informed choices that truly support your well-being.
We're all responsible for our own health journey.
That's right.
And by using these critical thinking skills and getting advice from trusted medical professionals,
we can navigate this complex world of information.
And make choices that are right for us.
Absolutely.
This has been such a fascinating conversation.
It has. I've really enjoyed it.
I feel like we've all learned a lot.
Me too.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We hope you found it valuable.
And informative.
Remember to stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly,
That's healthy.
stay healthy. That's